Hello, and thank you for joining us for the second iteration of our Introduction to Ductless Heat Pumps. In this module, or Part B, we're going to be talking about creating value propositions and improving sales. Now, this is critical to making sure that we're actually delivering to the consumer something that actually satisfies their needs. We do this by understanding the benefits and the features that come with ductless heat pumps, creating a value proposition around it, and then providing the best solutions or options to the consumer. What will we get from this module? Well, we're going to talk a lot about how we talk to customers and clients, but really the goal here is to help you sell more effectively. Now, some of you may come from a background as a contractor or a salesperson where you're already familiar with sales. And don't worry, we will cover some of the traditional sales techniques, but what we're going to do is look at how we can supplement them by thinking about value proposition and thinking about how we communicate to make that sales process better and help you sell more effectively. So we'll talk about the basics of what a ductless heat pump is. So if you did not watch Module A and you jumped right to Module B, that's okay. We're going to cover some of those basics. We're going to talk about the benefits and the appeal that really come along with ductless heat pumps. We'll talk about turning those benefits and features into a value proposition. Again, making sure you've got at least 1 to 3 key terms of phrase or key items that really define why ductless heat pumps are a great value in your mind. And then we'll turn that value proposition into good sales techniques. So as we go through this, there are a lot of different names of organizations out there. There are utilities like your local PUD or your local energy company. There are groups such as NEA and Bonneville Power. And then there are these other companies like ClearResult and TRC, and this can all sound a little confusing. So let's just clear up one part behind all of this. And that is who NEA is. And why is this critical? Well, NEA is the sponsor of the Northwest Ductless Heat Pump Project. And NEA is actually a nonprofit that utilizes funding and contributions from over 140 individual utilities and energy efficiency organizations, such as Bonneville Power and the Energy Trust of Oregon. By leveraging contributions from this 140 plus membership group, NEA can actually help do things like buy down costs, work with manufacturers, develop regional and national standards, and a number of forces that actually all work together to help leverage all of the consumers in the Pacific Northwest and all the ratepayers to maximize the contribution. What this means is that every participating utility gets a chance to benefit without having to create a program design 100% for themselves, without having to contribute 100% themselves into bringing a new technology to market. NEA can operate on behalf and with participation from a large number of their membership to kind of draw this out and help transform a market. Again, NEA is the primary sponsor behind the Northwest Ductless Heat Pump Project. So while it can sound confusing with all the different players in the market, your individual utility will offer the incentives and may actually run their own trade ally network, but behind all of this, if it's associated with the Northwest Ductless Heat Pump Project, that is a collaboration again of this large number of utilities and energy efficiency programs all working together to transform this market and really help make sure that ductless heat pumps get a great footing in the Pacific Northwest. The outline for the rest of this module, we're going to cover that review as I mentioned before, where we're going to cover what a ductless heat pump really is, what the parts are, and how we communicate about it. Then we're really going to talk about how we communicate with our consumers and our homeowners and our clients. And that is really understanding the difference between talking about benefits versus features. There's some psychology behind this in terms of how people typically respond that we'll cover. We will talk a little bit about what an ideal home or customer looks like. And that's pretty critical to making a sale within the Northwest Ductless Heat Pump Project, particularly if you're looking at sales that come with utility incentives. There are specific home types, specific customer types that matter in order to provide these additional incentives. Now, With or without incentives, the value proposition is still very strong for a lot of homeowners, and so we will cover that, which kind of exists in a world that can happen with or without incentives. We'll make sure all this is resulting in closing sales at a higher rate, and then we'll wind up looking at some of the resources that the Northwest Ductless Heat Pump Project provides to our trade allies and to our partners to make sure that you're able to use and leverage years worth of experience in marketing and training, quality assurance, to really help your sales take off and make sure that ductless heat pumps are a key part of what you want to offer. As we go through this, the images in here are all images that have either been granted specific rights to the Northwest Ductless Heat Pump Project for use, or that come from pre-approved licensing or commons such as Bing, Wikimedia, Google Images, and our own Northwest Ductless Heat Pump Project image library. Again, here's our outline. We're going to start by reviewing what a ductless heat pump is and what the critical and key components are. Before we jump directly into describing that ductless heat pump, we do want to cover this path to ductless contracting success. This was introduced and gone into more detail in Module A. So if you're starting at Module B and you want to learn a little bit more about this path to ductless contracting success, I recommend that you go back and check out Module A. Now, if you've already sat through Module A, hopefully this is very familiar to you, and we're talking about these steps. So the first is gaining awareness. Now, this means both for yourself as well as being able to communicate that awareness to consumers. The good news, partially because of the Northwest Ductless Heat Pump Project and other efforts, the average consumers, between 33 and 57% of them, are aware of what a ductless heat pump is. That variability has to do with whether or not they're unprompted or if we give them a little bit of a nudge. But that's still a large portion of people, somewhere between a third and half of the market already understands what this is. So in order for you to be successful, you need to have that same level of awareness. And you need to think about that awareness in terms of your business model. So understanding risks and rewards and understanding how having a high standard of quality figures into that. Second is going to be getting firsthand experience. Whether this means going through trainings, whether they're generic trainings, high-level trainings such as you're sitting through with this module, more specific trainings, some of the future modules, or trainings that are sponsored directly by manufacturers and distributors. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in some of the later modules. But a lot of that is available, and we can direct you towards that at the Northwest Ductless Heat Pump Project's website, which is goingductless.com. Don't worry if you are furiously trying to scribble that down. We'll have that as a resource again near the end of this presentation. Step 3, really maximizing your sales and marketing. And we're going to talk a fair amount about that today, but of course there's a lot more to this. There are additional trainings and seminars you can attend that really help you understanding how the skills and value propositions fit in with pricing and application to different homes and different consumers. This is maybe a lifelong journey for a lot of us. So today is just scratching that surface, getting you introduced to some of the concepts, and hopefully that's a next step you can take. Finally, if you really want to be successful in doing ductless heat pumps, after sales support is critical. As it turns out, the way that majority of people learn about ductless heat pumps is still word of mouth. While the internet is creeping up in that regard, word of mouth still is the #1 way that people learn about ductless heat pumps. So that means that educating your consumers so that they have a long-term positive relationship with the ductless heat pump is how that results in positive word of mouth and, in the end, referrals. One of the greatest ways to get new business is when you don't have to do a ton of additional marketing. So if you can support the people you've already sold to, that can lead to improved word of mouth and improved referrals. So this is our general path to ductless contracting success. Again, each of the modules that you go through here are going to touch a little bit more upon this, and we encourage you to continue this journey by seeking further education, some of which we'll introduce you to through these modules. So, what is a ductless heat pump, or a DHP? Well, in a basic home, we want to compare our ductless heat pumps to electric resistance heat. So that house with a baseboard, or that cadet wall heater, or maybe even electric furnace. And electric resistance heat is kind of like a toaster, right? It works by providing resistance to electricity, usually through metal, such as a metal coil, metal wire. And as that resistance builds up, it produces heat. Now, this can be efficient, and at its maximum, it can be about 100% efficient. Ductless heat pumps fall into the heat pump category, which, much like air conditioners for your home, for your car, or refrigerators and freezers in your home, this is the technology that has been around for a long time. It's just that it's been repackaged into a modular unit that can be installed on the wall or in the ceiling or low on the wall near the floor, and utilized to directly heat and cool a large room in a home. Again, same technology as a refrigerator, but if you just want to think about this, that difference between electric resistance heat being like a toaster and a ductless heat pump being like a refrigerator, neither needs to be scary. Both are familiar things that work all the time in our home, but one clearly has a more technological advancement to it. Refrigerators are much more advanced than our toasters. And likewise, a ductless heat pump is a much more advanced technology than is that electric resistance baseboard heater. They're going to do a lot of the same work. It's just it's going to do it much more efficiently and much more effectively when you use a heat pump. So the very basics when you're trying to have this explanation for a homeowner, have them look in their kitchen. Most people have a toaster or toaster oven, and almost everyone has a refrigerator or freezer. That's an excellent starting comparison to help people understand the basics of the technology. To get a little bit more specific, ductless heat pumps, we're also sometimes referring to these as mini splits, or I've even heard as ductless mini split heat pumps. Depending where you're at, you may hear different variations of this. They typically are going to include 4 key items. That outdoor unit, if you look at the image here near the center, you see this outdoor unit. It kind of looks like a large carry-on piece of luggage for an airplane. That is the outdoor compressor, and that is where a lot of the magic happens in terms of taking heat out of the outdoor air, putting it into refrigerant and moving that refrigerant into the home, or the reverse, taking heat out of the home and releasing it to the outside. This compressor allows us in a ductless heat pump to do both heating and cooling in the home. So bringing in a DHP, you're actually bringing in a high efficiency heating system and a high efficiency cooling system because of that outdoor compressor. You've got the indoor head. So if you look near the top of this image, that bulky piece that you see is typically the indoor head. Now, we've heard people say, geez, I don't know if I can get used to this large thing on my wall. Well, isn't that funny? We've said that for years about ductless heat pumps, but yet no one complains with all the grills and registers that you see in a home with an electric furnace, or all those long, obnoxious baseboards that you see in a home with electric resistance heat. It's all about just simply getting used to seeing this in your home. And what we're hearing repeatedly from customers that have gone through our Northwest Ductless Heat Pump project have very high customer satisfaction rates. Depending on the year we've asked, we're talking somewhere in the 93 to 98% range of customer satisfaction. So essentially, once people actually get a chance to feel the heat or feel the cool coming off of that indoor head, boy, it's amazing how easy it is to overlook something that we initially maybe had a slight hesitation on, because now we really recognize the benefit that it brings to us. Now, connecting that indoor head to the outdoor unit are a series of refrigerant lines. You may hear a contractor refer to this as the line set. The line set or refrigerant lines, that's where that refrigerant I mentioned that gets compressed or expanded, that's how we actually move heat from outdoors to indoors. It moves through those refrigerant lines. Most of the time, these should be covered by a refrigerant line set cover. This is going to do a lot of benefit. One, it will protect the line set from solar UV rays that can degrade some of the insulation, protect against rodents and cats and other types of varmint that may want to scratch the insulation. And it, of course, can improve the looks as well. Not everyone likes the look of a pipe wrapped, metal pipe on the exterior of the home. And we typically run them in between walls and in attics and underneath floors when they move to the inside portion of the house. The final piece is the control. Ductless heat pumps can have two different types of controls. The control that you see here is sometimes referred to as a wand. It looks a little bit like a remote control for your television. It's often mounted very near or actually on the side of that indoor head. This is a control. It's not actually a thermostat. It is the control where you can set the temperature higher or lower, and you can switch from heating to cooling mode with this control. There are actual remote thermostats that can be purchased, wall-mounted controls and wall-mounted thermostats that will give you that experience that you might be more familiar with an electric furnace in a home or another type of heating system where you have that central control mounted on the wall. Those are available for most brands. So you as a contractor who are going through this, you're going to want to work with the manufacturer and distributor that you select, and we'll talk more about that in future modules, to really get a good sense of what you want to offer in the packages that you provide. And we'll talk a little bit more about that today and more in future modules. So these are the basic elements of our ductless heat pump. Some folks will actually talk about ductless heat pumps and say, are these magic? How are we actually creating heat? And how can this be more efficient than electric resistance? It seems like it's magic. It seems too good to be true. Well, heat pumps don't actually create heat. Heat pumps use refrigerant to move heat. And believe it or not, ductless heat pumps can actually move heat from outside to inside, even down to 5 to -10 degrees, depending on the brand and whether or not you get what's called a cold climate heat pump or not. It does this through a cycle where it compresses refrigerant or allows refrigerant to expand. As you compress or expand refrigerant, you can either absorb or release energy. As you absorb energy, what's left behind is a cooling sensation. When you release it or expand it, you create a heating sensation. So we're just really moving heat around. We're not actually creating it. And it does take some electricity to do this, but we can actually get almost 300% or more efficiency by using these refrigerants and using these outdoor compressors and indoor evaporators to do this kind of work. More so than that, we're actually using energy that's been provided by the sun. So in a way, you could say that these are a type of mechanism that use solar energy. Now, when I say that, I hear some people say, well, Dan, isn't that also true of fossil fuels or of a lot of other types of energy? Aren't a great many of these created by solar? Yes, they are. This is a more real-time, however, impact of it. Not quite as real-time as photovoltaics, but think about that outdoor air. The reason it has any temperature to it is because the sun beats down on the earth and it heats our ground and it heats our home and it heats our driveway and it heats the trees. And that in turn releases heat enough to warm the air. And again, even if it's -10 to +5 degrees, in other words, very cold, like some of the parts of the Northwest are, even in those temperatures, again, there's a reason why it's not -50 at night. There's a reason why it's not -100 during the winter. And that is because that solar energy gets absorbed and re-released. And we're simply using this refrigerant cycle to move some of that heat into the house in the winter to heat it, or to remove heat from the house in the summer to cool it. Remember I mentioned these things are around 300% efficient. It's kind of like you buy one and you get two free in terms of units of energy. You put 100% electricity in, you get 300% heat or cool out. It's almost a buy one, get two free type of scenario. Again, that's because the refrigerant cycle really works well with compression and expansion of moving heat from outdoors to indoors or from indoors to outdoors. Next, we're going to talk about how we communicate this. You can spend a lot of time trying to talk to consumers about the features associated with ductless heat pumps, or you can talk about the benefits. I want you to just mentally think about what we've talked about the last 16 minutes or so. I've mentioned both. What has resonated with you? Was it me trying to go into detail about expansion and compression? Or was it me talking about delivering heating and cooling and high efficiency and high effectiveness? Think about those. Think about the difference between a device that provides heating and cooling versus a device that provides only heating. Think about that as that difference between do we want what's going to resonate better with your consumer, benefits or features? So, what are some of the benefits with ductless heat pumps? Well, the very first thing is cooling. These things will provide air conditioning. So, if we're actually approaching a home that has electric resistance heat, and we're going to use a theory called displacement. Maybe we're not going to replace the entire heating system. That's a heavy first cost for a lot of homeowners, and they can get a lot of benefit by simply displacing the heating in the main body where they spend most of their time with a single head ductless heat pump. Well, one of the benefits is they're going to get air conditioning as a part of this. And believe it or not, most consumers actually find savings in their utility bills by upgrading to a ductless heat pump, even though they're now paying for cooling. How can that be? Well, again, these devices are so efficient that even with paying some money for cooling, they're still on net saving energy and still saving on their utility bills. Particularly on the heating, they're saving a tremendous amount. Now, if they also happen to have a plug-in air conditioner or a window air conditioner, this ductless heat pump is going to help them save even more in comparison. Second, these are pretty simple devices to install in most scenarios. They're less disruptive than, say, removing and upgrading all the ductwork in a home and putting in a central furnace. Comparatively speaking, this is a pretty simple installation, and the controls are a little bit more simple and easy to operate than in a scenario where you're having to learn how to program a thermostat. They result in lower electric bills, so the cost, as I mentioned, to operate one of these over the long term is going to be a net benefit to that consumer. And considering these devices are going to last you anywhere from 12 to 30 years, you can imagine if you're saving every month and year after year, it is not going to take 30 years to make back your money. Depending on where you live, depending on the type of home you have, those types of paybacks can be, anywhere from 6 years to 15 years, but well within the lifetime of those devices. And finally, believe it or not, these devices are really quiet. I know a lot of people think about heat pumps, and they think about the heat pumps of old, that very large box compressor outside, and then the large fan inside that sounds like a jet engine taking off every time it comes on. And there's some truth to that. The old heat pumps of 15 or 20 years ago did require a very large compressor outside, and they required a lot of air to move over a coil because they just don't get quite as hot as a furnace does. And in order to deliver enough heat and cool, they had to move a lot more air. And they did it with inefficient fans. So you had this outdoor compressor that was loud, and to the point that a lot of cities and jurisdictions actually have noise ordinances that require these compressors only to be put on the backside of the house and not within 15 feet of the neighbor's property line, etc. Ductless heat pumps, on the other hand, are much more quiet. First of all, they're much smaller, that outdoor compressor, and second, the technology. They use something called an inverter-driven motor in these compressors, and they allow it to operate both at high and at low compressions and at low speeds. And if you operate 60% of the time at the lower speeds, 60% of the time you're nowhere near the peak noise. So these things are much more quiet. And then on the inside, the ductless heat pump head, that indoor head that we showed, yes, it does still move a fair amount of air, which is good for that homeowner because it's going to help them heat or cool their rooms pretty rapidly. But it does it with usually an electrically commutated motor, which is just a fancy way of saying a variable speed motor on the inside. And again, allows to operate at low or high speed depending on the need. And even at high speed, it's still a much more quiet operation than a traditional heat pump. So benefits: air conditioning, relatively simple installation, much lower electric bills, and much quieter than the heat pumps of old. So those were the benefits. Now let's talk a little bit about the features. And again, think about what resonates better with consumers. Thinking about those benefits that we just learned, or trying to communicate these features. There will be a small percentage of consumers, typically those maybe that work in the tech sector or engineers or architects or accountants, people who like to crunch numbers and think very logically may respond well to some of these features, but the lion's share of decision makers who are going to be spending their money are going to respond better to those benefits. But the features, these things do provide both heating and cooling. That's pretty cool. You can talk about that because unlike an air conditioner, which only has the refrigerant cycle going one direction, heat pumps have a reversing valve that allow it to run both directions. So your refrigerator or traditional air conditioner work in one way only. Heat pumps with that reversing valve allow you to move heat from outside to inside or from inside to outside, so provide both heating and cooling. They have this advanced heat pump technology. I talked about that inverter-driven compressor, low ambient noise, and they're really getting these what we call cold climate models, or you may hear a manufacturer describe these as enhanced capacity or extended capacity or ultra efficient or ultra capacity equipment. We look at them and call them cold climate heat pumps in the Northwest. They work really well when it's cold outside. That's a feature, but being able to say they deliver heat at 0 degrees or 5 degrees would be a benefit. They have the highest heating season performance factor, or HSPF, on the market in terms of heat pumps. So even comparing it to a standard central heat pump, they are more efficient. And then the capacity, so the amount, or the oomph, if you will, of the heating and the cooling varies with the heating and cooling needs of the home. That's one of the real great benefits with these variable capacity heat pumps, typically these inverter-driven compressors. They have variable speed drives and modulating controls, so when the house needs just a little heat or just a little cooling, it's capable of providing that. When the house needs a lot of heat or a lot of cooling, it's also capable of providing that. As you can see, the features are wonderful and they're important for you as a contractor to know, but I really do want you to be thinking again, how do you want to communicate these to consumers? Benefits or features? One of the top things we hear all the time is, what kind of savings can we get? While this may not be the number one thing that people are looking for, it's certainly going to factor into their decision making. By the way, we feel and find that most consumers respond very well to topics around comfort, indoor air quality, and performance. After those things are things like the savings that they get. And part of the reason why is we do not have utility costs anywhere near as high as other parts of the country. So it's just simply not quite the same burden. But that being said, there's still a lot of savings available. If we look at a standard electric resistance system, I mentioned that before, that electric baseboard, the cadet wall heater, the central electric furnace, and we compare a ductless heat pump to that, you can actually see there's quite a difference in the typical heating bill per year. Keep in mind, we use very average costs for the Pacific Northwest. Where you live and where you work and where you sell could be more, could be less than this. Keep that in mind, this is an average amount. A ductless heat pump only providing 70% of the needed heat for a home, so using that displacement theory of just providing a single head in the main body where people spend the majority of the time, even in that scenario where we're not replacing the entire heating system, we're seeing huge savings. Look at that. It's almost a 50% reduction in heating costs for that home. That's equivalent to around $600 a year savings. This is pretty critical. And this is a really nice additional benefit on top of all of those other benefits, as these savings are real. And again, $600 a year, look at this over 7 years, you're talking about, you know, a large portion of the cost of installing this has been recuperated. All right, now let's look a little bit about what we want to look for in a home and our customer. And I do want to encourage you to, at this stage of the game, you can familiarize yourself even more by going to goingductless.com and looking at the buyer's guide. While that is geared for consumers, it's probably important for you as a trade ally to think about how consumers are looking at this and what we're asking for them. It also kind of walks through some of the ideal home types. And so it's just a different way to think about it than we're going to show you here. but it's really good supporting content. So check out goingductless.com and look at the buyer's guide. So let's think again about how this typically works. You get a call from a customer. They're asking questions about upgrading their heating system, or maybe they have some curiosity because they've seen an advertisement about a ductless heat pump. We want to start by asking them some basic questions to identify, is this house even a good candidate for it? So we want to look at some things like, how do you heat your home currently? Do you have natural gas or electricity? Do you use a wood stove primarily, or propane? Having a good understanding of this will be critical, because ductless heat pumps, particularly in that displacement scenario that we mentioned, are most ideal for homes with electric heat and electric resistance heating. So second question, what kind of heating system do you currently have? You may need to help a homeowner appreciate this. Not every homeowner knows the difference between a furnace and a baseboard. When you start describing them visually, that's going to help them a lot. So get kind of used to how you want to describe this. Again, that buyer's guide is a terrific, it's got some visuals to go with it. But understanding the heating fuel and the type of heating system they currently have can really help you help the homeowner. An electrically resistance heated home is the ideal home for installing a single ductless heat pump head, which is going to be the lowest cost of entry for a consumer to come in. So if you're concerned that they may balk at pricing, thinking about a displacement for electrically resistance heated home is the ideal. Second, you're going to want to arrange a site visit, and that's going to be talking through the expectations of what the homeowner will experience when you come to a site visit, and you'll want to outline some of your general terms. In other words, how long will it take for you to generate a bid? Do you send one person or two people? Do you need access to their attic and their backyard? Do you need to be able to find the breaker panel? Being able to set all these expectations around that site visit will be critical for your success. So some things that you're going to want to find out when you do that site visit: you want to confirm the heating fuel type. You want to understand the size and how the house is laid out. You'll really want to understand the existing heating system type. Again, is it zonally heated, meaning room by room with something like baseboards or ceiling cable heat or wall heaters, or is it something central and forced air, like a forced air furnace? And then you want to know the age of the home and whether or not it's been retrofitted or weatherized. Has it been added on to? Has it gone through a deep remodel? Having those kind of understandings about the house will give you a much better sense of whether or not it's a good candidate. And then things to think about with the homeowner. Do they own or rent? Obviously, an owner is going to have a better return on investment for looking at something like this, whereas a renter may be simply looking for information to give to the homeowner, which can be a little tricky for you as the contractor if you're dealing with the resident, not the person who owns the home. Look at the length of time they intend to stay in the home. If they're trying to sell the home next year, then the thought here is, are you doing this job because you're trying to solve a pain point for the way they live in their home, or are you doing it to help them increase the resale value of the home? The longer they're planning on staying in the home, the better your argument or your building part of your sales pitch around that return on investment makes sense. Look at how satisfied they are with their current system. If they actually love their current system, but they just want to save money, then you need to be thinking about how is the ductless heat pump going to work compared to their existing system. In many cases, it may actually be an improvement. So being able to sell that you're going to get improved performance and savings might be an angle that you want to push. And then you want to look and ask a lot of questions about, are they comfortable in the home? Do they have any issues with indoor air quality? Do they have high utility bills, particularly during the peak of winter or the peak of summer? Learning these things about the homeowner are going to help adjust what kind of sale you may try to make. In other words, what solutions are you going to try to provide to them? So what's the ideal candidate house look like? Well, we love simple box, single-story ranch homes. If we're talking about displacing a portion of the heat in that main body of the home, a hugest bang for the buck is going to be the single-story ranch. Similarly, what we refer to as a box in a box or two-story home where the upstairs and the main floor have the very same footprint, that's another pretty good candidate where the people spend the majority of their time in the living room, kitchen, and dining room on the main floor. Again, we can displace the heating and cooling there with the ductless heat pump and allow them to continue to use their existing system in their bedrooms. Another good candidate, but takes a little bit more nuance, is the split level or story and a half home. And this kind of depends on where people spend the lion's share of their time. Is it that middle level or the bottom level of the home is going to be what you're going to need to find out to determine where a ductless heat pump head would provide them the best benefit. And then we really like the homes, again, that have these baseboard heaters or those wall heaters. That's where we're going to get huge benefit with displacing that with a single ductless heat pump head. Okay, we've talked a lot so far about benefits and versus features and what to look for in homes and consumers. And now we want to talk about sales and value propositions. Getting trained at sales actually is that part of selling more effectively and making more money. This is from an energy efficiency program in Colorado. And we're using this as an example because in this scenario, the program and the contractors went through a bunch of sales training. And when they first started, they had pretty decent close rates. You know, almost 30% of the projects that were had a first call from a homeowner resulted in work being done. That's not bad, actually. And in your experience, you may find 30% has worked for you. After they went through some pretty detailed training, however, on sales, they were able to increase it to almost 66 to 70% of the homes had some work done. So think about doubling your close rate, or better in this case. So the average cost per sale, in other words, the money that was invested that turned into sale, whether that's the time spent paying for a sales agent, including as well as putting marketing into the account, or even buying leads, it's a dramatic cut. So sales training actually can make a big difference. We're not going to claim that today's module is really going to do all of that work for you. We hope it's just enough to get you started thinking about this, though. And if you can start employing some of these practices, we may see you inching from 29% close rate towards that 71%. And it may be just enough for you to inquire about future and even more detailed sales training for your staff. Another piece to remember here when we talk about sales, and this goes pretty closely with that benefits versus features. This is from Suzanne Shelton from the Shelton Group, and she is a whiz at marketing and sales and understanding what moves the needle with consumers. And she has found that people purchase based on emotion, but they still want to justify that purchase based on facts. If you sell only based on emotion, that's what leaves people feeling like, did I make a good decision? But if they can back it up with facts, so if they can allow themselves to say, I bought this because I wanted that cooling and I wanted heating and cooling and I like the idea of not wasting energy to do it. But the facts are, this is a high efficiency technology. This might improve the resale value of my home. This device is going to last for a number of years. And maybe it's better for the environment. Those are facts that help back up the emotion that consumer used when they made their purchase. And that has a lot of value. So what are some of the emotions associated with this? Financial security, comfort, being able to do the things you want to do, not just the things you have to do. Buying something that is relatively and comparatively simple on terms of the install and the complication of how you operate it. And believe it or not, looking good and looking smart in front of your peers and neighbors and friends is actually an emotional trigger. So any sale needs to be thinking about, how do I connect those benefits that we talked about earlier to tie to these emotional triggers? We want those features then to tie to some of the facts. So that's how we're going to set this up. So saving versus spending is part of our financial security. Making sure that you have that comfort. So keeping you toasty and warm in the winter and providing cooling maybe that you have never got in that electrically resistance heated home is a really nice comfort benefit. Being able to do things you want to do. Who doesn't want to go on vacation with the family in the summer? Wouldn't it be nice if you could save $600 a year on your heating bills, if you could put some of that towards that vacation? having that simplicity of this is a relatively simple to operate on-off device. It wasn't that complicated to have it installed. I didn't have to be out of the house for multiple days in a row. That is another one. And then again, looking smart to the friends and neighbors is pretty critical. So what are some of the facts? We see up to 30% annual savings on electric bills. If you had an electrically heated home with resistance heat and you just got even a single head to displace the main body of the home's heating, you got up to 30% annual savings on your electric bills. That is a nice fact, and that really is good to support all those emotional pieces. On top of that, if you're participating in the Northwest Ductless Heat Pump Project and you're working with one of our member utilities who has an incentive program, there may be incentives anywhere from $300 to $1,200 up front to help buy down that cost for the consumer. Another great fact. High efficient, high quality cooling. That is a fact. That is also triggers one of those emotions, but the fact that it's being done at high efficiency and with high quality is part of the facts. And then this is going to be up to you, but developing multiple price options. We consider this one of the cornerstones of good sales, is being able to provide multiple levels of opportunity for the consumer. That is a fact, and these ductless heat pumps mean a relatively simple install. Typically, this is somewhere in the 3 to 8 hours for a single head install. Of course, every house is a little different. On the very, very easy ones, it might be that half day. On the complicated ones, it could go as long as a day and a half, but on average, say 3 or 4 hours to 8 hours is a typical install. So if you've been doing contracting for a while, or you've had any job in sales, hopefully this established sales technique is going to feel very familiar. This is actually an updated version of what Honeywell introduced in the 1970s to the marketplace in terms of the 6 steps to sales. We've updated them a little bit here for the sake of integrating them with today's training, but it starts with coming in and listening to the pain points, understanding why did the customer call you? What is it that they're trying to resolve? And then through this process, establishing trust with them. The better a listener you are, the more questions you ask them about themselves and how they live and what their challenges are and what they want out of this, the more you can establish trust. Then you use that and you start to evaluate the home and the systems, understanding those pain points. From that, you can design a series of solutions. Again, we'll cover these in a few minutes about what those may look like, and offer ideally 2 to 4 choices. We'll just say offer 3 choices. It's amazing how often if someone is given a low, medium, and high choice, whether that's from the cost perspective or the performance perspective, it's amazing how often our psychology as humans wants to draw us towards that middle selection. It feels like the safe choice. So offering that is going to give you the best bet. Make sure that your standard product that you offer the most often is your middle of your 3 choices. And then setting the right job expectations is critical. When we've seen quality assurance fails on jobs, they really fall primarily into 3 categories. And the first 2 categories are by far and away the highest. The first is simple things like not getting paperwork done correctly. Believe it or not, to this day, that is still, in most of these programs, the top fail. Shortly after that is not setting proper expectations. The fact with the ductless heat pump is you're going to have to drill a hole from inside the house to outside in order to run that line set or those refrigerant lines through. And making sure that people understand that a hole has to be drilled through, and then, you know what, we're going to cover it on the inside and we're going to do our best to cover it on the outside, but there may be touch-up painting needed. And then we're going to run a line set and we're going to need to put a concrete or another type of pad outside for the compressor to sit on. And that may need to be in a place where we don't want any runoff to get onto a sidewalk. Those types of things are expectations that need to be set forth to begin with, so the homeowner has an idea of what to expect on the back end. When those are not aligned properly, that is the second largest, most common reason we have QA failures. The third is usually rogue things where something just gets broke or is not installed correctly. And believe it or not, that actually is a small percentage of our failures. The majority of QA challenges, again, are simple things where we ignored paperwork or where we didn't set proper expectations. So why is this important to talk about this? If I said this is something from the 1970s that's been part of our sales, why am I going through this now? What makes this unique and new? Really, again, if you remember the first couple points there of listening to the pain points and establishing trust, and then using that to evaluate the home and develop solutions, the old way of doing it was this, what I'm going to call old school sales speak, was coming in and being very analytical, transactional, and comprehensive, right? Kind of flood the consumer with knowledge. Let them know that you know what you're talking about. Use technical language and lots of metrics. It sends a message that we're the experts. And there was a time where feeling like someone was coming in and taking care of you and they were the expert helped with sales. But the way our culture works today, that actually has often a negative connotation of coming in and giving this perception of we're the experts, listen to us, we know what's best. It's not that that may not be true, it's that if that's the primary message you're sending, it simply doesn't resonate like it used to. So what's the alternative? What are we recommending in that? Well, savvy sales speak is thinking a little differently. It's coming in and being attuned and thinking about the relationship you're building with this customer. Thinking and talking about things one step at a time. Using storytelling and using metaphors and relating one scenario to another. This helps a consumer at the end of the day when they make this decision feel like they were smart. They made a smart decision and you were their guide. You were their trusted ally in getting there. Now, that might sound a little bit like I'm overhyping it, but again, think back to that example of the Colorado Energy Efficiency Program. The training was really developed around moving people from old school sales speak to savvy sales speak and really thinking about how to develop relationships and then how to use language and metaphor and be relative. Using these things in more detail and getting consumers to feel smart about their choices, that's how we got to double or almost triple close rates. It does work because it's just saying we're up to today's modern times. We understand and appreciate consumers don't want to be treated like children. They want to be treated like the smart people they are, and they need a savvy sales guide to help them get there. So we've talked a lot about DHPs and benefits and the ideal consumer and how we close sales. I want to wrap this all into this idea now of a homeowner value proposition. So this is at the core. When you're building the solutions, you're going to offer three choices to the homeowner. They need to be centered around a value proposition. So what makes a ductless heat pump a good purchase? Why is this the technology? Why is this the purchase? Why are you the contractor for them? That comes down to the value proposition. And the value proposition is a statement that should convince a customer that whatever you're selling, whether it's a product or a service, is going to add more value than something similar or something that they might compare to in the market. So again, this can be talking about the technology as well as talking about you as a contractor. And you need to make it very clear, which means not overcomplicate it. Keep it simple. So let's do that for ductless heat pumps. The most resonant value propositions that we found time and time again when we talk. I did mention earlier that comfort is a huge part of it, but we want to talk about this. What we've seen works along with comfort is going to be these three. The first is saving money, and that's because these are much more efficient pieces of equipment. It also may mean the incentives that help buy down the upfront cost. But this is part of the, yes, this is a little bit emotional. Remember that concept of being able to do more of what you want to do and having financial security. Those were some of the emotional tugs that come with saving money. And then the factual side was that saving up to 30% on their annual electric bills. Saving money is a great value proposition if you can tie it to that emotion and back it up with facts. Providing cooling really is part of speaking to the comfort. The heating part is going to heat just similarly to how maybe their old system heated, assuming the old system worked. But being able to provide cooling, this is really targeting that comfort. All of a sudden, your solution has a benefit not just during the winter months, but a benefit during the summer months. And then finally, reliability of both the product and the contractor, right? High quality contractor participating in utility programs with quality assurance, programs that require orientation and training of the contractors, and then being aligned with a high quality product, quality manufacturer, quality distributor. That all relates to reliable contractors that can install reliable and simple to operate products. Your sales, your solutions that you develop for the consumer, and the three choices that you provide to them really need to connect to these value propositions. The saving money, remember, that's that the emotional tug of financial security and being able to do what you want, not just what you have to do. Cooling, which is providing comfort now year round, and reliability, that simplicity and the smart choice making. This is going to be critical. And remember, we're tying it back to this established sales techniques. Remember your value propositions as you listen to pain points, establish trust, think about how the home is operating and the systems that are there, designing solutions and offering three choices and setting expectations. Remember those value propositions and communicate them. As we wind this up, we want to go back to the setting homeowner expectations. You're going to need to really get to a happy place where the homeowner understands what the ductless heat pump will do for them. And you're going to need to help them understand what the homeowner is going to need to do for the ductless heat pump. There are a couple of simple things there. To maximize performance for ductless heat pumps, we recommend that you set it in heating mode during the winter and in cooling mode during the summer. There is an option to set it for auto, which will, in theory, automatically switch between the two, but you're going to maximize and get the best both performance and efficiency if you have them set it to heating mode in the winter and cooling mode in the summer. That means the homeowner actually has to switch the mode when it's starting to get hot outside and then switch it back when it's starting to get cold. It's not hard to do, but if they're not educated to this, they're not going to be as happy. They're also going to have to do some light maintenance on this piece of equipment, things like checking the filter and cleaning the filter semi-regularly and checking the condensate drain on an annual basis. Those are some very light touch maintenance things that they're going to need to do, but they're going to need to know that this is a part of their new system. Now, before you leave, you've been to the site. This may mean that you're going to give them a verbal kind of quote and you're going to follow up within 24 hours with a printed quote. It may mean that you're going to go sit in your truck and write this up and email it to them before you leave, or it may mean that you have a worksheet and you're going to do the worksheet at the kitchen table, in the kitchen table conversation with them. You want to make some sort of offer before you leave, even if that offer is, I will get you pricing on 3 options within 24 or 48 hours. Make them an offer. And those 3 options, you can think of them as a good, better, best. Maybe you can think of them as a meets the basic needs, exceeds the needs, or the Cadillac model, the one with all the bells and whistles. Or in a really practical, really kind of logical perspective, you could say, I'm going to talk about how to do displacement with a single head in the main body, maybe a displacement with a single head in the main body and one in the master bedroom, or maybe the home really does need a full system replacement. I just want to give you a heads up. If you're looking at that kind of full system replacement, most utility programs that provide incentives will only provide an incentive for one of the ductless heat pump heads. So you should know that going in. There's a lot more on this in our program orientation, which we'll talk about in future modules. But I just did want to put that out there. You know, it's one of the reasons we've talked a lot today and in the previous module about displacement is that is the system and the design that works the best with our utility incentives that are available. Before you leave, get some sort of response. That response may mean I need to talk to my husband or wife or partner. It may mean this is really great. I really want to think about it and I want to look at financing options. It may mean, hey, that's terrific. I can tell you right now, I already want the middle option. Right? It could be any of these things, but get some sort of response that, great, I will look at your bid and get back to you within a week. Some sort of response that you can get from that consumer. gives them a degree of buy-in, and it gives you a sense that you've actually come to a next step in this process. So that was the basics of what we would do. I want to give you some resources that kind of help follow up from this module. I mentioned this earlier, the goingductless.com website. Here's the actual link for it, www.goingductless.com. You can find utility incentives. You can actually check out the Find a Contractor, which if you choose to go through this process and become an oriented installer, you can actually get listed on this website as well. And so you can see how that would work. And there's a lot of additional information here about ductless heat pumps, including that buyer's guide that I mentioned that kind of gives homeowners some good guidance on whether or not their homes and their heating systems are ideal ones, and understanding and learning that so that you're talking and selling to the same type of information they're getting from other sources is going to be ideal. There's tons of educational resources here as well. Everything from explaining what a ductless heat pump is to talking about when is a good scenario and a good time to move to ductless heat pumps. And again, all of this is available at goingductless.com. One of my favorite pieces is kind of the living the ductless life infographic. This is a kind of a great piece to have printed. It's really nice to have in front of the consumer for that kitchen table conversation. Really make sure they've got something in front of them that is warm and friendly and expresses both those benefits and the features, or touches on the emotional as well as supports the facts. There are some other places as well. One of our partners, Bonneville Power Administration, or BPA, also has an HVAC technology guide that's available, and there's a link here at the bottom of the screen you can see. If you can even just type this into your search engine, BPA HVAC technology guide, this will be a really nice piece for you. When you dive into this, it actually looks and goes pretty detailed into things like what are some of the basics around HVAC, what kind of technologies are available out there, and what other topics kind of have to do with this and are related, things like building codes and federal efficiency standards. This is really great additional training information for you as a contractor as you're getting yourself geared up and really putting ductless heat pump as a key part of your business. On top of all this, again, what we're introducing to you through these modules is just the briefest of introduction to hopefully get you thinking that ductless heat pumps might be something you want to integrate in your business. You're going to want to get more training. GoingDuctless.com actually has, if you go through partners or trade allies, which is a little tab in the upper corner, you can actually learn a lot more about trainings and events in your area by clicking on the trainings and events links. You can also partner with manufacturers and distributors because they are the ones providing a lot of the industry training that's out there. We talked a little bit in the business case and in some of our other resources about identifying manufacturers and distributors that are going to work very well for you. One of the core things to think about is the type of training and support they provide around their products. So there are more manufacturers and distributors than what are listed here, more than we can fit on a page, and these are listed alphabetically with no preference given to any one or the other. All of them have different things that they excel at, so finding the one that works for you is going to be really important for you to get more training that works for your business. So far we've gone through the business case was part A, and part B here today was the sales basics. There are two other modules if you'd like to continue down this path. Part C is the design basics. What are the things that you need to be thinking about as you're designing a ductless heat pump system? We'll talk even more about that displacement I mentioned there. And then we'll talk a little bit in part D on installation basics. There's also a whole nother series on contractor best practices. Those are some other recorded webinars that already exist, and we will guide you to them as we move along. If you have some desire to get some hands-on direct training and support, that is available on a case-by-case basis. If you want to reach out to us, we can help connect you to either good manufacturers and distributors, or in some cases even work directly with you and create a case study on how you developed your business. We would love to get feedback on this. Info@goingductless.com is the best email address. that comes, and I actually will get a chance to see those myself. And we actually transport any advice, thoughts, or feedback across the spectrum of the folks at the Northwest Ductless Heat Pump Project. So even if you want to say, I loved everything about it, but that narrator drove me crazy, that's okay. Give us the feedback. We'd love to hear it. And I really want to thank you. I know it takes a lot to spend an hour of your time sitting through one of these modules. If you have questions, if you have feedback, or if you want to follow up with us, again, hit us up at info@goingductless.com. And don't forget to check out the website, www.goingductless.com. Thank you so much for your time today, and we look forward to seeing you in the next module.